with the king! Hold your ground! Do not suggest it! Do not suggest it! They're your handful!
You've gone too far.
What have I done but what was expected of me? Forever upholding the kingdom, the family, the law. Will you flout it all to do as you please?
Alicent, let her go!
Where is duty? Where is sacrifice? Is trampled under your pretty foot again.
Release the blade, Alicent.
And now you take my son's pie. And to even that you feel entitled.
Exhausting, wasn't it? Hiding beneath the cloak of your own righteousness. But now they see you as you are.
The famous lines. Now they see you as you are. Guys, what is up? This is my review on House of the Dragon, episode 7. Oh my goodness. Can I just start off by saying that this show is phenomenal. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the videos that I made about the show before. We already knew that the storylines, the concept was already going to be phenomenal. But I think what we've seen in execution, that this is a serious contender of Game of Thrones impact and potentially even more. Because one thing I will say that happened in Game of Thrones that hasn't really happened here is with Game of Thrones, they set the scene, right? So there was a lot of seasons that they were sort of pacing. And they set the scene. It's a thing that we call, in filmmaking, where you set the scene because you're letting people understand the world that we're in. We're letting people understand the characters, you understand? And you're just letting people understand the rules of this world. And because we already have the prerequisite from watching Game of Thrones, we already understand the histories, we already understand the ways that they lived, we understand all the cultural things. They didn't have to do all that setup, and they could start this season sort of jam-packed and skip through time and get away with it because we already understand the backstories, we understand the rules of the world. And because of that, I will say that they have much quickly jumped into a phenomenal series from the get-go. Like this show, I think it had like 10 million or so streams 10 million viewers when it came out the opening weekend, and everywhere we all know it's a success. It's a success of a show because of all the setup has already been done. So I don't think it is productive to compare House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones, which is better, but it's really telling that this show is potentially on the same level, potentially even better if they end it better. And I think for me, what I really enjoyed, I think it was around the episode 3 mark where I really saw, it was episode 3 mark when Daemon got into that battle scene, and I really experienced the essence of Game of Thrones. Everything from the dialogue, the way the mannerisms of the characters, the way that they portray these roles, the dynamicism or the multi-dimensionalism of the characters, so many things. So in this video, I just want to break down some of those concepts. Well, specifically, I want to talk about this episode. Such a great episode, and I just really want to tackle some of the interesting moments, interesting moments that stood out to me. All right, so let's start off with the funeral. We see, obviously here, they bury the body, but even before here, one of the most interesting parts was when the uncle, so he's a Velaryon, I'm trying to remember his name. Guys, I'm really rusty with names, but the uncle is giving this speech, this Velaryon uncle, he's giving this speech, and he says a lot of stuff. He talks about the Velaryon bloodline and how it is pure, because the Velaryons actually have pre-existed the Targaryens. They've pre-existed them as a family. So when this uncle is just talking about the legitimacy of the bloodline, I think there's a line that he says, you know, he's talking about how they are from salt. And then there's a line that he said, there he is. But there's a line, if we go a little bit forward, there's a line that he said, and the cameras were right on Rhaenyra and her sons. And they were talking about the bloodline, the heritage has to stay true and pure. And we see Daemon laughing there, and everybody's looking at him because it's really inappropriate that he's laughing. But this is a little bit of foreshadowing, right? He says, okay, salt courses through the Velaryon blood. Ours runs thick, ours runs true, ours must never run thin. And they put, the camera is on Rhaenyra and her two bastard sons. I mean, she's admitted in the episode that her sons are bastards. And Daemon laughs. And this insinuates, he laughs and he insinuates that, you know, he laughs at the joke, like, because the blood must run thin. But clearly, because I think at this stage, Daemon is not necessarily on Rhaenyra's side or trying to support her. But I think what we are going to find out in the next episode, and this is a little bit of, if you saw the teaser for the next episode, we can see that this uncle, sorry, I don't remember his name, the Velaryon uncle, is trying to take over Driftmark, and Driftmark is their house, right? Where they are right now in this episode. He wants to take over Driftmark because if we see in the episode, we see that names again, Leonor seems to have died. And so there's no Velaryon that is set to inherit, no male heir. You know, Corlys, again, names, man, I need to have a thing with names, but I have too many tabs open. But Corlys Velaryon, the guy here, right? He has no male heirs. He has no male heirs. Like, his son is dead, and, you know, he has granddaughters. And so his brother is kind of there like, well, I obviously have my own lineage. I have my own line. He probably has his own sons. So it would make sense that Driftmark passes on to him. And I think that's what they were showing in the next episode, because now it's now a battle against who is going to get Driftmark, because you don't have any suitable heirs. I think what was interesting too, there's a lot of foreshadowing around that, and it was really subtle in the beginning of the episode, but it was definitely something that stood out. So the next scene, I'm going through each scene, the next scene was the sort of funeral reception after, you know, they had dumped the body into the water, and we have this awkwardness of this estranged and ununited family as they all gather, and there's an awkwardness. Everybody, it's like there's a big elephant in the room. There's a big secret in the room, and it's caused the tension for everybody in the room. So we see all of them make eye contact with each other, and each person they make eye contact with, there's a story, there's a dynamic, there's bad blood, or there's something in there, but it all stems from the elephant in the room, the big secret. And what is that big secret? The first one is Rhaenyra's sons are bastards. The second one is Rhaenyra's claim to the throne is weaning down, and her lineage is not strong, because her having bastards just makes her lineage seem impure. You know, it doesn't help her cause, even though, look, she's clearly going to be the heir, but you can't have bastards. You don't have a true heir to take the throne. So then, because it's not even about whether they're a Targaryen or not, it's really just about the legitimacy of their birth. Because in these times that the show is mimicked after, because it's a fantasy, a bastard is an illegitimate child and therefore should not sit the throne. But I think it's really interesting because we think about Game of Thrones and we think about how many bastards have sat that throne. Joffrey, for one, all of what's her name's kids, well, her other son, also bastard, sat the throne. So it can't be new in the realm to have a bastard sit the throne, you know. And I thought there was a very interesting thing. I think I want to talk about it very quickly, about just the threat of that. But I'm going to get into that in a bit. But I want to finish this off. And then the last elephant in the room is the fact that Leonor Velaryon is gay, and he hasn't performed his duty. So this is the tension in the room, and we see everybody walking around just with this tension. They all know each other's secrets, they all know the dynamics, and they're all sort of judging each other. And I think now we can see the war has started to begin. The real tensions, even though when they were younger, we didn't know how things would pan out. We didn't know how things would pan out, but it was clear that this kind of moment would have happened and everybody would go for the throne. So now it's kind of like more pronounced, more in your face. It's like this big pregnant elephant in the room that, like, how are we going to avoid this? And I said this in the previous review that I made. What is it? Strong men make strong men make strong times, or strong men make soft times make soft men make hard times. And I think that King Viserys is in that intersection of a soft man who has created soft times and a lot of tension in the realm. It is unfortunate. Damn. Oh, I didn't realize that you guys hadn't seen me. I have a lot going on here. So what else is there to talk about? I have like about 7 or so points that I want to make. I'm on the second point. And so when Viserys, so we see this scene and it's all this tension is building, and it's just climbing. But when Viserys finally then goes up and speaks to his brother, he's kind of like offering peace. It's the first time, like, it sort of like breaks the tension in the room, and he's offering peace, and it just kind of shows that he's just totally oblivious, or pretending to be oblivious, to the tension in the air. And more importantly, he's pretending to be oblivious to it, and it's almost like everybody's performing just for him. Everybody's behaving themselves just for him. That's how strong this tension is. Everybody's just, just trying to get on with it just for him. I thought another interesting thing was about Aegon's character and the way that he sort of bullies his younger brother here, Aemon, and he bullies all his siblings. And I think he's an interesting character to look at. Yes, of course, we know Aemon is very interesting. He's the cliche villain that we're going to see rise. But Aemon is also a villain, but he's kind of like the cool villain, right? The one that you kind of like, because he doesn't even like anyone in his family because he thinks they're all idiots. But funny enough, like, he is also an idiot. He's always drinking. All his priorities are about, having sex and drinking. And it just makes him seem very unserious. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how his character develops and what is going to look like. Is he going to betray? Because he looks like he's very capable of betraying his family, and even though he's the heir, he's supposed to be the true heir, right? But the way that he behaves, the way he acts, he just wasn't raised to be an heir, which is so interesting because Otto Hightower told his daughter, raise Aemon to be an heir. That's the instruction. And that's not what she did. She just scolds him. She's always scolding him, but is she doing much raising? And she it's so interesting how their characters, this is just a new thought, how their characters kind of clash, because she's this like high and mighty religious individual, and he's the complete opposite of that. And if it's almost like she spent all her time focused on Rhaenyra, focused on the dynamics, and not enough time raising her children, giving them strong moral compasses, giving them, passing on her beliefs and her systems to her children, because it seems like all of them are rogue. So what have you been doing? Just sort of like mending to the, or attending to the king to ensure that he, and sitting in fear, worrying about Rhaenyra instead of focusing on raising your children. So that's just an interesting dynamic that I just thought of. So I want to go on to the next scene. And this is on the Velaryon conflict. I thought this was quite interesting. This scene where Corlys Velaryon sits with his wife. And in fact, even just before Corlys Velaryon sits with his wife, this scene was quite interesting to me. Okay, this is a great scene here. And we see him standing with his brother, right? This is Corlys Velaryon, this is his brother. And see the look on his brother's face. Just sort of this, it's almost like this silent envy and just disdain for what has happened to his lineage. Because think about it, the two of them, they grew up together in Driftmark. They're from this very proud family. You can imagine what they have been taught growing up, especially Corlys as the heir, but him too being the second brother, and we know he's a very proud man. But to see that, well, what do your children look like? The people that are set to pass on our family legacy, what do they look like? And we see this one is gay, which obviously is a problem at the time, but not just that he's gay. Look at him just like stumbling around in the funeral, even though, like, hey, granted, his sister died, so give him some like empathy, but I don't think that's what he's thinking about. I think he's thinking this idiot this idiot here, this is who is going to inherit Driftmark, this waste man. I think that's who hasn't even performed his duty, who's dancing around with bastard children and not even acting furious about it. And so our lineage is to pass on to people that are not true to our blood. So that's kind of like, I think that's his perspective. But I think when you go on to the next scene, where you see Corlys sitting with his wife, Princess Rhaenys, this is a very interesting scene because it kind of shows us how their priorities are very different. And I just let me just summarize it quickly. It seems that Corlys's priorities are all about legacy. And in stark contrast, Rhaenys' priorities are about blood and family. And it's so interesting because the way it plays out is the two of them are supporting each other's inheritance, but not supporting their own. And that's an interesting contrast. So we see here, Rhaenys talks about, first of all, Corlys talks about, or Rhaenys accuses Corlys of holding on to the fact that she lost the Iron Throne and he needs to let that go. She's kind of focusing on what we have at hand, but he doesn't want to let that go because that's the biggest seat of power. And it's about legacy for him. It's about passing on their family name. This is his mission in life. This is what he was raised to do. This is his duty. But to her, she's like, let that go. And now she's more concerned about the fact that they have Driftmark, and Driftmark is going to pass on to bastard children, And that to her is a problem. To these bastards. And obviously Corlys is like, well, his famous lines is about, what is this brief mortal life if not the pursuit of legacy? And he said another line that was very memorable is that history does not remember blood, it remembers names. So regardless of whether his blood passes on, his name will pass on. Because if you think about it, we have no idea in history. We have no idea what Jesus Christ actually really looked like. We have no idea what a lot of people looked like, right? Especially before they started doing paintings. But we remember their names. And that's what his priority is, legacy. Because nobody really cares about what someone looks like in history. They care about the name. And so to him, they're in our bloodline, they're not in our bloodline, whatever. But I think what is part of that Velaryon pride, which is missing, is that our blood is of true Valyria, and it has remained pure. And that's something that their family uses to flex on the Targaryens all the time, like, we are true Valyrians. And that's actually probably another reason why Daemon laughed in that scene, because they're using that to flex, like, we are, because their Valyrian heritage predates the Targaryens, who are also from Valyria. So they're using that to flex, but he's kind of like, well, he cares about legacy, and okay, we'll lose that, but whatever. But I think the rest of them are sort of like, we have to stay true to it. And I think his brother only cares to stay true to it because of his own selfish interest in becoming the Lord of Driftmark. I think, and making sure his legacy or his lineage passes it instead of his brother's. I think that's really what his concern is. It's more so selfish interest. All right, so let's go to the next scene. And it's Aemon, Targaryen, and Vhagar. So he mounts Vhagar. Oh no, actually, before that we have Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is bold. So at first, I think before I sort of looked at her like this bold and careless woman, but the story has really made sure not to position her as this quote unquote like harlot who's just looking for pleasure. Her story is relatable. It's not that easy to sire a child with a gay man, right? Okay, so if we really comes down to it, let's remember that Daemon is the one that introduced her to sex and her sexuality. He's the one that sort of unlocked that. And when he was introducing her to that, he talked about pleasure and the importance of pleasure. But he did talk about duty versus living your life and enjoying the pleasures. But it seems as though Rhaenyra wants to have her cake and eat it too. It seems as though she wants to have the pleasure, but she also wants to do her duty. And we see that in her pursuit of Daemon, right? Who she truly loves. But aside from that, we also saw that in her relationship with Leonor, her husband, and the fact that she didn't like the idea that he wasn't attracted to her sexually. So it's difficult for them to lay together. And so for her, she just figured, this man loves me, let me have a kid with him. And sure, that's fine. But I think if she was really a dutiful woman, if she really prioritized duty, she would ensure that she, quote unquote, mounts Leonor and has a child with him so she has true children, if she was really going to prioritize duty. But it seems as though she's conflicted with duty versus her duty versus her pleasure. And that kind of is her inner conflict. And that sort of at the same time is something that she might battle. She's another thing I watched, like the reviews from the actors talking about it, and the actor who plays her basically talks about her being abandoned all her life. She's always being abandoned from her mother first, and then her father, her Alicent, who was her best friend, then Daemon. So she has these abandonment issues in her life that she's sort of trying to rectify with. So I think that's an interesting element, and seeing how that plays into her desires to be wanted, her choosing men that want her, as opposed to choosing someone who was probably be disgusted about the idea of having sex with her. She just craves to be desired because she's always been abandoned. She always complained about not having anyone on her side. And she told that to her father in, I think that was episode 2 or 3, that she felt alone. She was abandoned and nobody's there for her. And I think that was kind of where, at least in those pleasurable moments, let her at least have somebody that was there for her. Who was also had to abandon her, right? He also had to leave her. So I think Rhaenyra is a very interesting character, very multi-dimensional, and I can't wait to explore and get to know her more. She isn't this typical hero that is sort of like a Jon Snow that you just absolutely love and adore. She's not that. She seems like, yeah, there's good in her, But is it good, or is it just the fact that she has this unfair injury, which is a tactic that we use in screenwriting, having unfair injuries to your characters. And because of these unfair injuries, you fall for these characters, you support them. So with her, she lost her mother, she lost her father, her best friend betrayed her, Daemon played her, so we've seen her experience all these unfair injuries in her life. But really, what makes her a great person, aside from just being a spoilt brat that just gets what she wants? So I don't, for me, of course I'm rooting for her because I know she deserves the Iron Throne, but at the same time, I don't necessarily like her character. It's not, I don't dislike her, but she's quite a bland character. So I'm very curious to see who she truly is. She seems to be somebody that's sharp with strategy. She seems to be so much more bold, and I'm just curious to learn who she is through the series. So that's another interesting thing when it comes to Rhaenyra. All right, let me go down here. I have a few notes. So another thing about Rhaenyra's selfishness, I would call it kind of her selfishness or her carelessness, is just this idea of her just making out with Daemon on the beach in public, just doing whatever she wants. And I think it very much reminds me of Cersei Lannister when she became queen, and she was kissing her brother Jaime. This is in Game of Thrones. She was kissing Jaime, I think he opened the door, it was the last season, she started kissing him, and he was whoa, someone might see us. And she's whatever, she's queen, right? She's queen, she'll do whatever she wants. It's this sort of entitlement, this authority that Cersei earned that authority. But let's remember that Rhaenyra inherited that authority. This is why I'm still coming at her for being kind of a spoiled brat, because she almost has this audacity that and it's a generational audacity that she inherited from her lineage, right? That I can do whatever I want because I'm not only just a Targaryen, but I'm the heir to the Iron Throne. So it's quite bold of her to stand there and make out with him in public. Also, when your children are being accused of being bastards, she's quite bold, and not just make out with him in public, also have sex with him in public. Oh my God. And you could have been caught, but no, you're not going to live in fear because of that authority that you possess. But it's these careless moves are going to, or are weakening your claim to the throne. And for someone who was never chosen as the heir in the first place, you would think that she would be more careful with her throne. But at the same time, we have to remember that she has very limited guidance in her life. She hasn't had that many people train her. She lost her mother. She hasn't really had anybody train her or guide her or be her mentor to say, don't do this. And this is also part of her desperation in seeking Daemon, because he was supposed to be that person. He was supposed to be that person to train her, to guide her, to do all those things. But he didn't, right? And so he was supposed to be the one to do that, but he left her. So who does she have? No one. And so she's just kind of figuring this stuff out on her own. As we do in life, we just figure things out. Another thing that was interesting is her relationship with Leonor, right? Her husband. We have to think about how careless these actions were for her to actually, even though she justified it, it was very careless for her to still pursue these men. Okay, it makes sense that he couldn't sire a child, and so therefore in her mind, wow, let me just at least let me have some heirs so they can not. She was probably thinking her having heirs was actually going to legitimize her throne, but not when those heirs are bastards. But at least she has sons, which is actually more powerful than if she was barren. If she was barren, I imagine they would have said, no. So it actually makes sense. At the end of the day, she does have heirs. She has boys even. And so it does kind of help, and it's better than her being a bastard. But at the same time, because, you know, in those days, they would have blamed the woman. If she doesn't have kids, it's the woman's fault. They wouldn't have blamed the man. But at the same time, you know, that's just an interesting note. So then let me move on to the next part. And the next part is about Aemon mounting Vhagar, the biggest dragon in the realm. Of course, the sex scene. So Aemon mounts Vhagar. And this is a very interesting scene for me because it kind of showcases this story that they're telling. They're showing us that they're using the same tools, that they are using the same skill sets that they used with Game of Thrones, because we're seeing a multi-dimensional character. In this one scene, there's so much multi-dimensionalism here. And let me break that down for you. So first of all, we know that he has this unfair injury, which I've told you guys before. This is a tactic used in screenwriting to ensure that somebody likes typically your hero, right? Your protagonist, when they have this unfair injury. And his unfair injury is the fact that he didn't have a dragon, right? And they make fun of him. Even his blood brother makes fun of him, gives him a pig. So you sympathize with him because it's almost like the underdog. He was the underdog. Then he ended up getting the biggest dragon in the realm, Vhagar, sorry. The biggest dragon in the realm. And that there shows, okay, you sympathize with him, right? So is this conflict of, yes, he's a bad character, but we sympathize with him. And then we see him riding Vhagar. And first of all, this whole scene with him and Vhagar, it was Vhagar testing him to see, do you have what it takes to mount me? Do you have what it takes to be my master? He takes him on this extravagant journey and on this extravagant flight. You know, he's hanging off. He's struggling to keep on. But this is the test. Can you take this flight? Can you take my big, are you worthy to be my master? And he passes the test. And that's the most important thing. He passes the test. And not only that, let me just read my notes here. Okay. Not only that, so not only does he pass the test, so he shows that he's this underdog who's highly skilled. Another thing that they use in protagonists in movies, to have somebody that is skilled at something, that has what it takes, right? That's brave. These are characteristics that they put in protagonists. So that's why they're crossing that line between, yes, he's a villain, but he's a villain that you like, kind of like Cersei. Yes, he's a villain, or like all the other villains that you love in Game. I don't think anyone liked Joffrey or what's his name, but they're villains that you like in Game of Thrones because they showcase their unfair injury. They showcase these other dynamics of them that make you support them. And the most actually powerful way that I feel in this scene that they showcased him as a villain is the music. And in the music, if you guys didn't notice, I can't play the scene right now, but they're playing the music. That was the Targaryen music that they used for just Daenerys whenever she Daenerys in Game of Thrones, whenever she kind of accomplished something or she had like some triumphant moment. Let me play it really quickly so you guys can hear what it sounded like. If it will play. Okay, I can't play it for too long, but turn that off. I can't play it for too long, but that's the music that they play go check out the scene. That's the music when Daenerys had some triumphant moment. That's the music that they played, and it's actually the Targaryen theme music. So I thought it was interesting that they played that movie music because we associate that music with Daenerys, who was a protagonist. In fact, even in the last season, they had a different type of music for Daenerys when she was being a villain. It was a lot darker. It was a lot more disturbing, right? And so I think here, having this triumphant moment kind of shocks our mind to think, okay, well, I do sympathize with him, but at the same time, he's a villain. So he's going to be an interesting villain to watch on the show. Then, of course, the whole dynamic. Okay, let me go to the main scene that we all love. The eye for an eye scene, that's what I call it.
Such a thing to happen.
Let me turn this. Eye for an eye scene. To me, this scene just kind of showed me how... First of all, let me start off by saying that this scene reminds me of the scene with Arya and Joffrey and Sansa in the first season of Game of Thrones, where Arya's direwolf, Nymeria, bites Joffrey, and they have to come in front of Ned Stark, and they kind of have to explain to Ned Stark... they come in front of Robert Baratheon, and they have to explain to Robert Baratheon what went on and why this happened. And it was this very tension building scene, or it's a lot of tension, because on one component, these are children and they're fighting. Children fight. That's just the way it is. But on the other side of it, their station, their position, right? These are heirs to the Iron Throne. Like, well, he's an heir. You know, these are people that are princes and they're fighting. So the stakes are high here. Yes, on one side, they're children. Children always fight, whatever. But at the same time, you just attacked an heir or something, or someone in line to be an heir. But with Game of Thrones, the difference was it was a beast that attacked. Even though Joffrey tried to attack Arya, it was a beast that attacked the heir. And so that was a different dynamic. But in this one, it's the children that are attacking each other, which even raises the stakes even further, and to the extent that he loses an eye. He loses an eye. The stakes are super high. But at the same time, yes, he's in line to the throne, but he's not an heir. Right? He's in line to the throne, but he's not close to becoming an heir. Even though he lost his eye, he's kind of not a relevant person to lose an eye. So Alicent didn't ask for his eye because is going to be king. So that would be absolutely a hell no. But he also is not in line to be, king. Well, he shouldn't be. So she wanted his eye. But I think the problem there is there's more at stake there, because he is way higher up, than that boy. So why, in terms of his positioning for the throne, so to ask him, because if he dies, he will be king. How could you potentially have a king without an eye? So that's one way to look at it, right? That's one way to look at it. Then there's another way to look at it. And I'm just looking at some of my notes. Right, so I talked about the complex. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. So then I'm going to talk about a little bit about them being called bastards, and that being the highest of treasons. Let's go back to Game of Thrones and think about when Ned Stark called Joffrey a bastard. What happened to Ned Stark? He was beheaded. It is the highest of treasons, questioning the heir to the throne, questioning the legitimacy of the heir to the throne. Because, yes, they would not have bastards sit on the throne. So that's the highest of treasons. And she wanted to remind them that what happens when you question him, it's a death, right? So these are the tensions that they're playing at. You've done something. You took an eye of the queen's son, but his positioning is lower, so that's okay. But you calling him a bastard, well, that is the highest of treasons. There was an interesting moment in the scene when Viserys asks, who spread these lies? He's going crazy. Who spread these lies about my grandson? Who spread these lies? Who spread these lies about my grandson? And who spread these lies about my grandson? Who spread these lies? And Alicent is just sitting there silent, because she knows it's her. We all know it's Alicent that spread these lies. We all know it's her. But she's out there just trying to be as quiet as possible. Don't blame me for this. Don't blame me. So she's trying to deflect, and she's trying to, she says something about, where's their father? She's trying to deflect and blame from herself. But clearly she knows that if it's her, she's in a lot of trouble. But I think the most important takeaway for me in this scene is how weak Viserys is and how weak he shows himself to be. Even the way that the Velaryon, Callus Velaryon, when he walks into the room, yes, sure, it's his home, Driftmark. He's the Lord of Driftmark. But when he walks into the room and he said, "What happened?" Like the way he shouted, the way they speak to their king. Think about, I just want to create a dynamic for you to see and think about when Ned Stark hosted the king in, hosted Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones, and look at the dynamic and the respect that was given. He would never speak to Ned. Also, I'm just trying to show you the contrast in all the kings and all the queens that have sat on the Iron Throne and the respect that they received from their subjects, and Viserys, who nobody really respects. That this chaos is even being allowed to happen, because remember, soft men create soft times. So he was this man built on soft times, soft himself, and he's creating, soft men create hard times, and he's creating extremely hard times because he's out here just trying to make sure there's peace, and he's kind of tiptoeing around everyone to make sure that there's peace. So they're out there just like, so I just think about, the dynamics of even Daenerys or Joffrey or Cersei, to think that anybody would question them or speak to them in any kind of way in front of their subjects, in front of everyone, would just be absolutely unacceptable. But Daemon has actually told his brother that he's weak in front of everyone. Is that even possible? Wouldn't you be sent to a dungeon if you dare spoke to the king like that? When we think about all the other people that have been put in that position, think about Daenerys. If anyone spoke to her any kind of way, what would she do? Dragon fire, right? But Viserys, in fact, the only person that he reminds me of is Jon Snow when he was king of the North, and the way the Northern lords spoke to Jon Snow, because the Northerners are arrogant and all of that stuff, but they just spoke to him however they wanted, and that's kind of like what is going on with Viserys. But I would say, as much as I say that, Jon Snow was even though he had a soft heart, but he was a hard man, and a man that garnered respect. And I think deep down, when it comes to the king, people just don't respect him. I don't think that people really respect him. So that's that. That was an interesting scene. Then let's talk about Alicent. Oh, Alicent, the famous scene that I played earlier. Oh, Alicent. She has shown her true self. So, in the last episode, I talked about how Alicent is sort of this high and mighty individual. She's, Hightower is where they're from, and that's where actually the faith, the seven faith originates from. And she and her father sort of like toe this line of like, oh no, they don't toe any lines. They actually just act as though we are all high and mighty and we are too good to do this or do that. And I think what was revealed, and it's when her father spoke to her later, he also revealed it, because he raised her to uphold, and we saw that in him too, upholding this high and mighty way. But then he said, we play an ugly game. So it's as though when we're playing an ugly game, we're allowed to be ugly. And I think, earlier in the episode when Rhaenyra said she just doesn't imagine Alicent has that in her to be, to do what she did, to kill, this just showed it to her. But I think what Rhaenyra is not registering, because obviously these are not children of war, but she's not registering that when somebody threatens any mother's child, you're going to get a different reaction. That's a reaction of survival. But here we're not seeing survival. We're seeing revenge, but stirred by this idea of survival, right? Because Alicent somehow sees herself as equal in a way to Rhaenyra. It's kind of like when you have a friend, and this is exactly what it is. When you have a friend growing up and you just kind of see yourself like you're kin to them. And then this friend all of a sudden starts to glow up. Maybe she loses weight. Maybe she starts looking prettier. And because you're still where you were and you sort of like have played all your cards right, but you're still where you are, you start developing this jealousy. You kind of see yourself as equal to her. But I think what Rhaenyra is trying to sort of suggest is we've never been equal. Yes, okay, you became queen, but I was always the heir. I was always born of the blood of High Valyria. I have always been the heir. I am not equal to you. We are not equal. And that is the concept that I think she's playing at. We are not equal. But Alicent here shows her true colors. So like she tells Alicent, now we see who you truly are. That was such a powerful line. Such a great line too. And in that moment when she takes the blade to Alicent takes the blade to Rhaenyra's face, everybody is looking, or when she cuts her, everybody is looking at Viserys to see what he does. What will he do? Your daughter, your heir, is bleeding out because the queen attacked her. Now Viserys, being a soft man, does absolutely nothing. Yes, okay. I guess I want to just be very clear. We're coming from watching Game of Thrones and watching kings literally slaughter, kill, and do all sorts of things for survival. Yes, in real life, Viserys' response is relatable and understandable because you want to keep peace in your household. This is your new wife. It's not like Viserys was out here getting a bunch of women pregnant, having a lot of baby mamas, having a lot of like polygamous settings. No, Viserys was an honorable man who lost his wife, an honorable, loving man who loved his wife deeply and dearly, and lost her. And now Rhaenyra is the only living representation of that wife. Looks like her mother. He loves Rhaenyra with all his heart. He has a very soft spot, and she is his favorite child because she has this unfair injury. Now, she is not only his favorite child, it's very clear and blatant in this whole scene to Alicent how much that he prefers Rhaenyra and his situation from before to her and her sons. This is why she's begging him to see her. He's begging him to support her. But he won't give her that validation because I am truly loyal to my first family. I'm truly loyal to them. And I'll say this, in polygamous situations, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see them honor their heir, honor their first setting. Not necessarily, you might see it, but not as much. They're not going to give them what they feel they deserve. But he honors Rhaenyra. He gives her everything she deserves. He validates every part of her. It is clear that she is his favorite child. Not only there, he says, if anybody questions the legitimacy of her children, your tongue is out. He ignores the fact that she has bastard kids. He chooses her as his heir. She clearly is his favorite child, and Alicent is bitter about that. But Alicent, yes, you've spent all these years, you've done all this stuff, but don't forget how you came there. Don't forget, and that's the problem with second wives or whatever. You forget how you came there. You got there for selfish ambition. You put yourself in that position. And this is part of why there's a lack of respect for you. Because you put yourself in that position. So when you're in that position, why are you feeling entitled to more when you're not worth more? Because Alicent was a young woman. She could have chosen any lord to marry. Well, obviously, who doesn't want to be married to the king? But in these situations, when you're married to the most powerful man, the richest man, you're going to run into his his dilemmas that he faces in his family, and that's something that makes you as a second wife lose respect. I think the next scene that was so interesting too was how Otto Hightower comes in, and we saw a different side to him, right? Because let's just think about Otto Hightower. You know, when we met him, he was this righteous man that wanted to serve the king honestly, truthfully, and he really did that. But what did he learn when he did that? He was kicked out of King's Landing, being an honest, truthful servant to the king. So in his time away, look at what has happened. His daughter, look at the way she is now. And he, as far as he's concerned, he's come back, and he's come back on a mission. His mission now is to take that throne. And he is being very clear. So it's kind of like like in school, when a teacher scolds you for doing something, you go home and your parents are like, oh, good job. This is exactly what happens. Because he raised her to be this good girl, goody two-shoes. She does the exact opposite of what he's raised her to do, but he's like, I'm so proud. I saw that side of you. Nobody believed that she had that in her. Nobody, apart from Daemon, who has seen people at their truest form and truest colors, but nobody believed that she had it in her to be a murderer, to do all that stuff. And she's proven it to not just everybody. She's ashamed of it within. And he says, no. That little ingredient you have, unlock it. We're going to need that in this ugly game that we're playing. And we see her for the rest of the episode sort of sinking into this new character that she's becoming, this more mature version of her that wants to put her sons on the Iron Throne, or her son. So I want to conclude. Okay, number 8. The last second to last thing is now about the blacks versus the greens. The blacks versus the greens. And what is the story here? The blacks are Rhaenyra and her lineage. The greens are Alicent and her lineage. And what is the story here? Now, when it comes to the war that they're playing, who stands to win, or what are the strategies that they have at play? And I think the first, in this episode, what it showed us, especially at the end, the most important scene, which I'm going to break down in a moment, the most important scene, but it showed us that Rhaenyra and Daemon have strategy, very powerful strategy. And it showed us that Alicent, on the other hand, has not just dragon fire, but she has weapons. You know, we've seen her servants kill their fathers. So she kind of has malicious weapons, which, who is more dangerous? Strategy that is rooted in empathy and love, or weapons? And that's kind of the battle that we're going to see play out, I think. What strategy, whose weapons are going to be more impactful? At the end of the day, strategy is very smart. Strategy can get you far. But when Dragonfire comes and burns up your whole town, well, what is all that strategy for? So that's great. And okay, so let me talk about that scene in the end. Very interesting scene. I mean, obviously this is very clear in case anyone doesn't understand it. Rhaenyra is talking about, well, obviously her husband has not fulfilled it. They're just an ungood match. They're not a good match. And now she wants Daemon, who she always truly loved. And in order for her to have Daemon, she's going to have to fulfill her husband's wishes of wanting to run away, right? She's going to have to kill him. And they played it. This is just good storytelling, the way that they played out this scene. Kills him, pretends like they kill him so he could run away, right? The way they played the whole scene out. Very great storytelling. I mean, there's nothing complex about this. It was very kind of straightforward, but we see him at the end. You know, it seems as though he's telling him to kill him, but actually, in actuality, he gets what he wants. They both get what they want. And when you watch it again, it's kind of clear, you know, the language that they use is very clear that he's giving him what he wants. You know, he's freeing him, like you said, not killing him, but making everybody in the realm believe that he's being killed. Great stuff. And finally, once that is now done, we see this reunion, this marriage. And this reminds me a lot of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, even though I don't think they exchanged blood because they're not of the same blood. But it reminds me of this like forbidden love ritual. And also a lot of their dynamics also reminds me of so many people, whether it's Cersei and her brother Jaime, the forbidden love, or Daenerys and Jon Snow. But we are now seeing the history of the Targaryens and how they binded their blood together to unite. And now their families are united. These are cousins and now they're step siblings. It's very incestuous. But this is the new true way. And this is how it plays out. Anyway, these are my thoughts. Is there anything else I had to say? Oh, I thought it was interesting too. Oh, this is an interesting thing. When she tells him that she's going to make him her prince consort. But with her ex-husband, he was her king consort. And why is that? She doesn't want Daemon getting anywhere near the title of king because she knows this man is power hungry and he will viciously play out that role. I am the king. He will play out that role. So she's like, no, you'll get king consort. Also, she doesn't want to do that because she knows that's probably going to piss off her dad too. But he might just get a little power hungry. So calling you prince consort and you're going to rule with me, but clearly, I am still the queen. She wanted that to be clear, but this is the best position that he could possibly get. When he came in the episode, we saw him pouting, we saw him upset because not only did he lose his position, he was also kicked out of King's Landing in a way because he wanted to marry her. And now he gets exactly what he wanted. Not only to get the woman that he's possibly going to love, the love of his life, most likely, but also he's getting the position that he always desired and always believed that he deserved. So I think this is just a very interesting dynamic. Definitely going to keep watching for more. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. New videos every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. All right. What are your thoughts on this episode? And I'll see you next time. A peace and stream.